This is episode 283 of the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. Welcome back to the show. Today I have Jack Bernstein on again, and it's been a few years, and Jack is a great conversation. Really interesting guy. Like, I really loved the first time I had you on the show, Jack, and we covered a lot of stuff, including, your history in entrepreneurship. You wanted to be a professional snowboarder, and you had some lemons given to you, made some lemonade. Just a career crusher, jumping on it, aggressive, winner, and lots of things that you want to see and learn from. So lots of gold nuggets in this episode. We talked about the market and what's happening. We talked about Jack's story, what he looks for, how he got into some private lending, and some of the interesting little things he does with that to secure his interests, and what he's got coming down the pipeline in terms of next steps. So really good interview. Just wanted to reassure you that you can grab a copy of my cash flow spreadsheet on the website, andrew-hines.com, if you want to crunch some numbers and start analyzing deals, because, hey, the mentality, sentiment in the market is changing. People are thinking, let's do some deals now. There are deals available even here in Ontario, believe it or not. And Jack firmly believes that, which is why he became a multifamily realtor here. And I sure do too. Also why I am doing business here in Ontario. So definitely grab a pencil, paper, and tune in for this one. You're going to enjoy it. Let's jump into episode 283 with Jack Bernstein. Welcome back to the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. I have Jack Bernstein on after about 2 years. He messaged me yesterday. I'm like, dude, come on over.
Perfect timing. Perfect timing.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. So, I mean, when you first came on, that was like my first intro to you. I've kind of been following you ever since. Looks like you do interesting things. You usually post some interesting stuff on your Instagram. I know you've been up to a ton, and I didn't know half of it. We've just been catching up. So give the lowdown just on what you do and sort of what's new for people who haven't also like heard your past episode.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the last time we spoke was like the heart of COVID, when things were really locked down, and I was kind of doubling down on real estate then, but I was actually still in a corporate job. So I was doing software sales back then. I was working for TELUS head office in Vancouver, but I was living in Oakville, and kind of mapping out like a 2 to 3 year transition plan outside of real estate, which I then executed on. And ever since then, my active business, I've been a full-time multifamily realtor and real estate coach. And then on the passive side, still focusing on growing my portfolio and buying assets and stabilizing and kind of just building the businesses.
Okay. And like I remember before you were snowboarding background. So you were ambitions of being in the Olympics at one point, I believe.
Yeah.
You also invented something.
Yeah, so I had a startup that I sold when I was 23. It was an electronics manufacturing company for cell phone charging stations with advertisements on them.
Yeah, that's so cool. And that was just entirely your own thought, or you had some help with that, or I forget the story behind it.
You know what? That one was, it's a simple story. I was out at a bar one night. I broke my back snowboarding, and I had a bunch of time off, and I was recovering. And I had a call coming in from a potential sponsor. And I had to leave the bar because my phone was about to die and they couldn't charge it there. Mm-hmm. So I thought, I'm like, you know what? I just left a bar with 3 or 4 friends. I was the one driving. And, they lost this amount of revenue because of it. And to be honest, I was just bored because I wasn't snowboarding. Kind of stumbled upon the idea and ended up raising some seed capital and
nice.
Growing it for about 5 years.
It's a cool little idea. So a good little bit of money came from that. And did you end up deploying some of that into real estate?
So that definitely helped. It definitely helped. I had a little kind of nest egg that I could, rely on for that. And then the other big thing was just being in software sales, right? I was living somewhat frugally at the time, being able to save a fair bit of money and then kind of living off my base salary and rolling all my commissions into savings for real estate. Mm-hmm. And, during that period, I kind of just started borrowing and buying properties and renovating with it. And just like how most people start, it's slower at the beginning, get a bit of momentum, and then you really, put some capital behind it.
So the type of deals you were talking about last time, I think you had a property in Oakville that somehow cash flowed, which was a little bit mind blowing. And then you had the Collingwood Blue Mountain stuff.
Yeah, so the Oakville property, I ended up selling that, which is great. So I netted $1 million profit on that one, which is really, really nice.
Oh, that's terrible.
So that was a great deal. And that was a 4.5-year hold, which was pretty cool. But I saw what was happening in 2022 with the market.
Yeah.
And someone had sold with a really attractive number on the street. And I just said, you know what? Like, I'm going to do everything I can over the next week and a half to get this place ready to list.
Mm-hmm.
And we had an offer presentation, 9-10 offers. And
Yeah.
but this was February 2022. So this was like the epitome of the
you
peak.
did it at the absolute perfect time.
Yeah, which is mostly luck, right? Like I can't attribute that. It was a little bit of guessing and a little bit of luck. So there was that. And then funny enough, the Blue Mountain property, that is still under construction. So I bought that from a developer, kind of like pre-construction thing, small 30, 40 homes, unavoidable delays because of COVID, material issues, this, that, whatever. And in reality, it's probably just the builder just dragging their feet because material costs are too high. Mm-hmm. And I just did my design appointment for that actually like a month ago.
Yeah.
So, you know, when you think about it, I bought that property in 2021 for 1.1 million and it's 4,400 square feet at the base of Blue Mountain. I just want them to build it because the inherent equity on it for what that would go for now is probably around, 2 to 2.5.
Really? How much are you in for?
1.1.
1.1.
For 4,400 square feet.
So you just know it's worth a ton. And then Airbnb right away with that one when it's done?
Blue Mountain's a little bit challenging with that kind of stuff. So what I'm going to do is, I'm a big skier. I love snowboarding. And I love entertaining and having kind of people up. So I'm actually going to convert the basement into like a 2 or 3 bedroom unit. Mm-hmm. I paid extra for a walkout and keep that for myself. And I'll just do seasonal rentals in the main part of the house.
So you're not allowed to do like weekly rentals or anything like that?
Honestly, the short answer is I don't know. Blue Mountain's changed some stuff up in the last like 60 days. And I don't think any Airbnb is allowed there in total in Collingwood or Blue Mountain right now, other than renting out rooms with a license.
Okay. Yeah. So, but I mean, lots of people have licenses and
they just revamped it. And I think they took everybody's license and they're doing like a pilot program. And if that pilot program works well, they're going to roll it out and expand it.
Really? So there's a lot of angry property owners in Blue Mountain right now. Yeah,
I have a couple students that are almost, activists up there going to city council meetings, meeting with the mayor and all that kind of stuff. And there's a pretty strong union up there from the hotel lobbyists. Mm-hmm. And they push back heavy, right? More Airbnbs, less people in Blue Mountain hotels and kind of staying on site for the mountain. Mm-hmm. But yeah, a lot of things have changed since then.
Oh, that's crazy. It's like that just goes to show like the risk associated with buying for a solely Airbnb strategy.
For sure.
Like they don't care. They get paid anyway. This always like bugged me a little bit, but I just totally understand it. Like dealing with the municipal like workers and then like in the building department. Hey, I'm paying like $400 a day in interest here, right? They don't care. Like they have their coffee break, they have lunch, they go home at night, their paycheck comes in every other Thursday. They don't care. So
I've been shut down. Yeah. Like I had, at my primary residence in Mississauga, I built an Airbnb there when I bought the property because I have a second legal driveway. And I got shut down like within 2 weeks and I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, oh, which neighbor did it? Who called me in? What happened? Mm-hmm. And I just straight up asked the bylaw guy, I'm like, how did you find me? He's like, honestly, you're one of the only people on Airbnb that put the front of their house on the listing. So I just looked on Google Maps and knew the approximate area.
Really? Interesting.
So honestly, thank God for Mississauga. Yeah. Super easy permitting process, $200, background check, and boom.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing. Go through those. Like that's where it's nice. I guess the issue with Blue Mountain is they already had regulations and then changed them. Haven't heard a whole lot of that. Like changed them to a drastic degree, which that was.
Essentially right now, it's the strictest it's ever been for short-term rentals up there. Mm-hmm. Like I would say maybe double compared to what it's ever been. So
that must have really hurt the property values.
I wouldn't say necessarily hurt property values because most people up there that are buying luxury are buying, higher net worth for family or they're part of a ski club or something. But I would say people buying smaller rentals, condos, townhouses, things like that, they're in close proximity to the mountain. A lot of those people got really affected.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I've gone up there and stayed in one of those like maybe like 7-8 years ago. Like it's a crazy good time up there. So like I'm thinking like that specific house, the owner's probably not very happy.
So they have a weird thing there where they have a area designated for short-term rental, but you need to buy the license and the license sits with the property.
Oh, okay. So that one would still be okay.
Yeah, but those are, I think it's called like Tyrolean Village or something like that. And it's like a designated short-term rental, but it's another kind of like NIMBYism, not in my backyard, like let us be and don't let any Airbnbs around us type thing.
Tyrol is Austria. Oh, they named it after like the Austrian Alps.
I think that's exactly it.
Yeah, that sounded familiar. I've been there. Very cool. So we were just talking off camera about like kind of, and we'll get into more of what you're up to, but we were talking about sort of what's going on, what's changed in the market. And you're in multifamily real estate, right? So I'd love to get your take. We've had these new changes to CMHC. We've had changes to the interest rate. Sentiment might be changing a bit. What are you seeing? Like, what's your assessment of the market, where it's going, and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that really stand out. So the first thing I would talk about is that rents are softening. So over the past 4 or 5 months, even though rental demand is at an all-time high, we have seen rents softening in a lot of key areas like Hamilton, Brantford, St. Catharines, Barrie, kind of different places like that.
So asking rent is going down.
Yeah, it's not like one of those things where, you churn a tenant and you think, oh, I'm just going to add another $500, $600, $700 to it. You might be able to add a bit, but it's not churning as fast as people thought. And to be honest, I think what happened is people just capped out their incomes.
I would think the same, like going through like the psychology, they're thinking, oh, well, we could stretch a little bit more. And then they come to realization, oh, that's not going to work. Maybe we'll just, get a place with our friends, or maybe we'll share a bedroom for a while, or maybe we'll get a house and house hack or something. Like, I feel like they'll start looking at alternatives, maybe move back in with mom and dad. I don't know.
It's a sad reality. And honestly, I think that's exactly what it is. Just people can't make any more money to be able to afford that rent. And then they're either doing a couple things, and it's a combination of everything you said, but a lot of people are just staying put. So instead of maybe starting a family and going and getting a house, or, upgrading your condo to a 2 or 3 bedroom, you just try to put up with the 1 bedroom, or instead of moving and try to size up, you just kind of stay where you're at, or I don't know. It's hard, right? I'd say a couple other things too. So the condo market is very odd right now, where, in Canada, everybody talks about this housing crisis, but we have an oversupply of condos, and condos just really aren't moving right now.
And that's anywhere, or like Toronto specific, GTA specific?
Mostly Toronto and GTA, but it spreads out pretty far to even kind of like Oakville, Burlington, and different areas like that.
So some of the new condo buildings, like, what do they even have in Burlington that's coming? I feel like there's plans for new ones coming up. Actually, there are some new ones going up right now.
So I have a student, actually. He's got a condo downtown Burlington, right beside Spencer's, in the building on the water there. Beautiful, brand new building. He's had a condo listed there, what I would consider is probably $50,000 under market for 60 days. Can't even get showings.
Yeah.
Marketed really well, really, really nice. But it's a weird dynamic. We always talk about this housing crisis, yet there's so much inventory of condos, which are typically an entry-level product, that just can't move.
Because they're so expensive, right?
Exactly.
Condos were cheap at one time. Like you could get into condos for in the 200s with not ludicrous condo fees. But now I imagine, like, what's his price point? He's probably in the $750,000.
I think mid sixes, but even just with qualifications, like for the average person to get into that, let's say sub 30 years old, the reality of average salary just doesn't match up to what you would need.
Right? Yeah. Cause like it used to be like just 4 times your income is what you can afford, but I don't think it works out like that anymore. Now it's going to be less because of the higher interest rates. That was a crude calculation, but
yeah. And obviously market sentiment's changing, right? Like the BOC, made their call, and 2 months ago we were going left, and now we're going right. So that's a good, optimism in the market, right?
We're going left and now we're going right on the scale.
Well, no, it's just the way I think about it, right? Like the government's policy is going this way, and then all of a sudden one day it's okay, we're doing a rate decrease. Now we're going the other way.
Yeah. I don't mind that. That makes sense. It's got the political connotation too. So more logical.
Okay, exactly.
Yeah, so they did make a change, and is that sentiment, like, obviously, and I've talked about this too, like, I think that's the only thing that really does change, because the quarter point doesn't really change things that much in terms of dollars saved for people, although it has its effect indirectly on the bond yields and all that. So is that the beginning of something meaningful? Is that a milestone moment in your opinion?
So my opinion is that it gives optimism in the market, but they're still paying for the next 6 to 12 to 18 months for people that are already going down the road of feeling it. So people that were trying to hold out, they're not going to reduce rates quick enough where it can probably save a lot of people. And when I work with different clients and speak to investors all the time, I say, like, we kind of have a guaranteed window of good deals for the next 6 to 12 months. And then at that point, the market will probably start to pick up from a recovery standpoint. But interest rates are a lagging effect on the market. So what happens today doesn't actually affect the market for a long time.
And historically, I've seen somebody share a chart on this, and it would make sense. It's like the majority of defaults aren't felt until after they start dropping rates. Like, because they drop it when they're like, okay, now we're there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's probably to come. And we already knew that only it was like a third of mortgages had actually renewed into the higher rates. Like, there was all these people with fixed rates in the 2s still, right? And every day more of those mortgages renew into 5, 6. So, those are the people who are 6 months before, they're starting to think, oh boy, what are we going to do? Do we list? Are we going to have to get an extra job to cover the, difference? Like, they're starting to make decisions now. And when enough of those renew, does that have that impact on the market where you're going to see values come down a bit more? Like, I don't know. I mean, with the amount of people pouring into the country, it's hard to know. But of course, immigration is going to be capped now. So maybe there is an opportunity going forward. I think more so on the single family homes, like I could really see that happening where they decline in value more. But with the multifamilies, I don't know. There's so much demand, especially with foreign investment, and it's obviously considered a more affordable way to live in like an apartment. Maybe that pushes those values
exactly.
up. Yeah.
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head with that. It if you look at this past correction called over the past 24 months, it's the same as every cycle, and it sucks and no one wants to say it, but the people that get hurt the most are not the wealthy people. So the larger multifamily market, call it 5 to 100 units, it has dropped a bit, and there are some good deals out there, but it hasn't shifted anything close to the residential market.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for single family home, a duplex, triplex, quadplex, like you can find amazing deals at 60, 70 cents on the dollar from market high. Whereas we didn't really see that in the larger multifamily. We just saw more creative deals and different deal structures and stuff like that
too, right? Like the incentives are always going to be around those multifamily pieces, to get more inventory out into the market.
Exactly.
And, so a lot of people's eyes are on that. It's obviously less accessible. So it's more sophisticated investors buying it and trading it, less desperate situations, which desperate situations lead to decline in market value. Because if you think, like, if everybody had their financial shit together, they could just wait. Nobody sell. Nobody list. And then the market price stays right where it is. It just slows down. But because you have desperations, we have to drop our price. We have to sell. And then their market equilibrium falls. So it's tough to say exactly why. I mean, I think that there's an argument for why multifamilies could come down too, and nobody knows for sure. Like, there's so many ifs. Could happen, you just don't know. So at that, with that in mind, it's like, okay, well, now we'll just move on to being proactive in our own portfolios.
And it's super interesting. So a couple of weeks ago, I met with Daniel Drimmer, the owner of Starlight, and he said something that was interesting to me. And he basically said that the Canadian multifamily industry is a stable and great industry to invest, but it's propped up solely by CMHC.
Oh, it's so propped up by CMHC.
And he essentially said, like, even though that we're long here on investing, we're diversifying into other markets out of necessity to just give, basically a balanced portfolio to our shareholders, because Canada just can't give the same stability. And if the big guys are basically saying that there's something inherently wrong with the system, but still invest, it gives like a mixed emotion, because, obviously there's money to be made, but it seems like there's some sort of stop in the road that they're worried about, that you should be putting money in other places. And I know you guys have done a great job in doing that. Yeah,
I think everybody should be thinking, how do I diversify something out of Canada? I'm not saying you have to go all out of Canada. I still have stuff in Canada, but I took a big piece of my portfolio and sold it off so that I could go out of Canada. And it's just like, do you really want to have all of your wealth tied up in the decision of one politician, one guy at CMHC, which, face it, basically a politician, worked for the government, gets to decide whether your portfolio has value or not? And we were all doing that with our portfolios with the Bank of Canada, because the interest rates had propped up values of real estate. So Tiff Macklem was the guy that got to decide what your portfolio was worth simply by pulling on a lever. Do you want that? And I started to see it in smaller ways than that. I didn't initially look at it like that. I mean, it was quite an eye-opening time these last 4 or 5 years. But I initially, I was just looking at it as like my student rentals were very, very like one purpose. I didn't really think they doubled well as like a family home. And I'm like, I feel exposed. All they have to do is shut down the university again and like income could dry up. I'm like, don't like that. I want something more universally useful. And I wanted to change that way. That was one form of diversification. So I just decided, hey, I'm going to get out of that asset class. But I mean, I really do think people need to now. And I think it's an easy sell. So many people are also investing in the US. Again, not saying you need to go to the US or even, you know, leave Canada completely, but it's a good idea to think about where else am I going to invest? And maybe get a visa, maybe get a citizenship, get some flexibility. I think that's the big thing. Get some flexibility. You can still make money here in Canada, and we are doing that, but you can do elsewhere too.
People want to hate on the US, and they just don't understand that it's still the best place for opportunity in the scalability and the I don't want to say ease of access and things like that, because there are barriers to entry to get there. But when you do get there, it's much easier to scale than Canada. In my personal opinion, there's more opportunity in the United States, and people just deny that here. It's kind of like a woke mentality.
I'm speaking from experience. Like Matt was paying, so my business partner Matt was paying like up to $1,000 a lead for off-market leads to buy houses in like Kitchener-Waterloo. We're paying like $30 to $40 a lead in the US.
Amazing.
Like that kind of difference. So we just pile the leads in. We can be more picky. And the growth potential, like a couple of Canadians come in and we just start up a business. We've got like 19 deals tied up conditional. Like we're
moving quick.
Like America, man. Like it's funny. Like some of the stuff Matt posts is like absolutely hilarious. Just like him singing America, America, going over our leads. But I truly, truly believe it. Like the level of sophistication down there on average is lower, no doubt. Like you'll see more polish in Canada at a surface level, but like the performers, man, do they crush. Like in the way they understand things, like that. The top end is way higher. But
everything's just like, it's a true economy based on entrepreneurialism, the way I look at it, even starting from something simple.
Meritocracy, right?
Exactly. From the tax code, right? Like being able to have full write-offs there as opposed to partial write-offs here on losses. So people are just incentivized and born there to just take more risk, honestly. Yeah. And obviously America's had its challenges with over risk and whatever.
Yeah, 100%.
But for someone coming in, maybe as a Canadian, you know, us being more risk adverse and being able to maybe not over leverage and do certain things there, you know, you could probably build a portfolio 2 to 3 times faster there than you can here.
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to have some fundamentals coming from Canada that are really going to serve you well if you apply that in the States. There's still tons you got to learn, but you come in with a good base of knowledge.
Exactly.
And then go get into rooms with people who are crushing down there and learn from them. Like the meetups down there, that's where I started. I made a ton of great contacts, like investor-friendly title companies, investor-friendly realtors and builders. Like you can meet all those people and then apply what you already know. And again, if you're in these circles and these communities up here, like you're going to have a very good base of knowledge just to talk and be understood when speaking with other real estate investors.
I think it's exciting too. It's like kind of, it's one of those tests, like, is the grass greener on the other side? And I would say this is maybe one of those situations, speaking to a lot of people who have gone and done it, that it looks like it is greener on the other side.
It is. Like, I mean, you have all the same challenges. You have to play big. Like you can easily just lose money. And the one thing I'll say down there is like, you'll encounter people who will steal from you and act like they're the victim as they steal from you. Like you have to assume that.
Yeah, that's tough.
Like you can, like the worst of the worst are worse down there than they are in Canada. Like in terms of like shysters and like just bad. I don't know if you can say that. I don't know what that even means, but just not good people. You'll find that. So you just got to watch out for that stuff too. Like, so is the grass greener? Yes and no. For me, it is, but it was partially because of me and what I wanted.
And I think going back to the diversification thing, why it's important, right, is just like, number one, offsetting Canadian dollar, having U.S. income is important. But I had a conversation with someone a couple months ago, and it was super interesting. He's like, you know, going to the U.S. or different countries is one thing, but also looking at diversifying in real estate in Canada. And I said, okay, well, what do you mean? Like asset classes, this, that, and whatever. He's like, no, I don't necessarily mean that, but look at where the best yield is right now. And he's like, you can find really good properties and stuff like that, but there's also great amount of money to be made in private debt right now. Interest rates are really high.
Private lending?
Exactly. Yeah. Private lending and different structured notes and different things like that. And, you know, I've done a bunch of it over probably the past 6-7 years, but because of recent events and stuff going on in the past year or two, I became more wary of it. But there was some interesting things that he taught me in regards to structure, on kind of how to do it to protect myself. So, one thing we do now when we do it is convertible to equity. So we can decide to convert to equity at a premium if they default on the note.
From a corp, you can just convert into their equity.
Exactly, or directly on an asset. And then whenever we give a loan now, we do what's called a right to register. So essentially, they're basically signing us on as a second position. We're doing title search first just to make sure there isn't anybody else on there, because
you're talking about if you do an unsecured, you have the right to register if you want. So
exactly.
like a promissory note with a right to register.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just all these like safety notes that, as you kind of get older and real estate and like stuff like that. Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas I remember 6-7 years ago, it was like, oh, promissory note. We all had this piece of paper that was flying around and it served its purpose at the time. But then people start defaulting on them. You say, okay, this is just a piece of paper.
It is. Yeah. You gotta deal with good people, right? Like the most important thing you do, number one, is deal with good people. And then of course, secure yourself.
Exactly.
And there's lots you can do. I mean, I've always talked about, there's a bit of a spectrum. Like, if your mom lends to you, she's probably just going to do it with a piece of paper. It's like, how much trust is there? And as an investor, I've been able to get those notes relatively easily anytime I've looked for them. But that's because of the trust that I've built, right? Like there's other people who shouldn't have that trust.
For sure.
We've talked about that a little off camera too. And obviously everyone needs to be careful with that kind of thing. Like you need to be careful about where you're lending your money. And I did want to ask you something about that. Like it just seems like now it makes actually even more sense to be doing the passive stuff, because as far as I can see, in most instances, that's generating a higher return. It used to be private lending was passive, but earned less. So yeah, you could do that. You could earn your 10, 12, whatever %, or you could own the real estate and get the 30. Well, that 30 in most cases doesn't exist unless you create it anymore. So are you seeing more of a reason for people to invest that way now, or do you see ways to make the real estate still yield those higher rates?
For me, still like the juices in the real estate. I think being a realtor, getting access to kind of off market deals,
like making it on the buy, you're saying?
Yeah, I still think there's ways to do it, but I really do like the private lending space from that. And I've bridged from just doing real estate. So like I've done restaurants, I've done other companies, I've done laundromats and, a bunch of other things like that. No, done lending to them.
Oh, just lending to them. Okay.
With basically rights to register or take equity in the businesses. And some of them I have converted on and they've become successful partnerships where, I own parts of restaurants and stuff like that now. And the yield premium that I got from converting into equity made sense because...
Oh, okay. So it's a sweet conversion rate, basically.
Exactly. And most of the time when someone's coming to you for money, they're, and they're not going to a bank, it's usually distress in some way, right? So it's kind of just like a way to hedge yourself. But with those businesses, I would say once they get past the breaking point, some of them do make sense to convert into equity. And then it just expands like the business lines and stuff like that. But, as when that happens and you start growing, then it becomes a lot to manage as an individual, right? So, I had to start hiring and kind of start helping with all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's a good topic to cover. Like, is it you were a one-man operation up to that point, or you brought on some assistants now?
Yeah, so I have a full-time assistant, which really, really helped. And honestly, he's an awesome guy. Like he does a job of 2 people, so super thankful for that. And then I have 2 sub-agents that work for me. So for showings and things like that, once the client's been taken care of and other stuff, I just don't want to spend the time driving around everywhere. But and then obviously contracted admin people and stuff like that, just doing bookkeeping and but it's important though. And to be honest, I remember there's an episode you had a couple years ago, and I think you were talking about your first hire, and I don't remember who it was with, but you guys said something you talked about, and you're like, by the time you hire your first person, you're probably 6 months past of when you should hire them. And then when you hire them, then you realize that like, okay, I really needed this, and it's the next step in growing my business.
I think Ryan Carr, if I'm not mistaken, we had that chat because he was like up on me about that. And he's like, you finally hired somebody? And when I hired my assistant, he's like, didn't we talk about that like 2 years ago?
Yeah, it's hard because you're like, okay, now I got to support someone else. Like, how does it work? Yeah. Is this the right time with the market, everything that's going on? Like, do I have enough stuff for them to do? And then you always find stuff.
You could find stuff. Like what I find with my assistant is like my business focus changes as the market changes. We change what we're doing, but it's like anything I'm working on, including right now, she's actually helping edit my audiobook because I'm narrating it myself for our book. But I'm having her do the edits because it's just tedious and time consuming. So it's worth it me to just train her how to do it. So yes, there is inefficiencies in having an assistant, but I mean, not having one means that you're doing all that work. And for me, it's just really hard to want to do that. And I'm sure there are other ways, like get really, really good with your systems, delegate more to like, the banks and stuff that you work with, if they can help cut, the amount of administration in your business down. But I think having an assistant is a game changer.
So what do you think about, like, everybody's always talking about VAs and stuff. Like I went down that route at some point, and having an in-person assistant, I think it's like the power of 5 or 6 VAs, and it's just so much better.
In-person is definitely going to be better. I mean, in terms of like value per dollar spent, I think it's probably going to end up being comparable whether you go VA or in person. It's just the price tag to get into VA is cheaper. Obviously, fair. Right? So for dollars spent, I think they're probably about equal. So you're going to pay that in person, what, triple, quadruple what you would pay a VA?
Yeah.
I
would say so.
And you're going to get about, triple, quadruple the amount out of it.
Essentially.
So yeah, maybe 4 VAs will equal 1 in person. I would say that's probably true. And the biggest thing is being there, right? Like, but you can also train yourself. Like a lot of that is like, for me, was my own inability to say, okay, I'm going to instruct my assistant. Like I'm going to take some time, get on a call. We're going to go screen share. That's helpful, like videos. A lot of it is as you grow as the employer, as the, the person delegating the tasks, you get more out. So that's a big thing. But yeah, I know a lot of people that talk mixed results with VAs.
It's just like buying back hours in the day, right? Like, if you're building a business, like that should be your sole focus. And when you got all these other distractions going on, like it's so difficult. So my assistant, he's half personal assistant and then half business assistant. So like just tasks around the house, like groceries and just, just that's whatever, amazing. All that kind of stuff. Cause I just found that I was spending like 20 hours a week on just doing stuff like maintaining my house and all this other stuff. And I was like, it's just not a good use of time after a certain point.
Yeah, you definitely, I mean, there's so much benefit to that. Like my wife's always ordering Instacart and stuff. I'm like, they charge so much, but at the same time, like it's a huge time savings. Like, what would we pay somebody to go out and do that? And it's like, that makes sense. And I agree. Yeah, like having that personal assistant, like people around the house, like just get things done. Like if we didn't have help at our house, like we do a lot of the same thing every night, which is like my son goes down, we just clean up until we go down. And that's not very fun either.
It's interesting too, the mindset around it, right? Because like I grew up in a poor area that was in a poor pocket of a very wealthy area. And I knew people's parents as a kid when I was growing up that like had assistants and this kind of stuff. And I remember the mindset of being around kind of lower income people growing up was like, they think it was like for a luxury purpose of just having someone to like do your groceries, this, that, whatever. And then when you start to get to the point where you actually see it from a business perspective, it had nothing to do with that. It wasn't a luxury per se. It's more so just to buy time back. And if buying that time back allows you to have more time with your family or just go to the gym, then that's still money well spent too.
Yeah. No, I think it's absolutely true. I think one of the big differences between those people, it'd be like that rich dad, poor dad situation where you've got the parents who don't delegate, but they work a job. They don't see the value in time. And it's so hard for people in the real estate space to like relate to people who are like single, working a job. Like they have no value for their time. Like they'll spend their nights watching Netflix. Like none of that matters. Like they just don't see like $1 per hour to what they're doing. Whereas like guys like you and I will look at it, well, what could I pay somebody to do this? And when I'm earning my most, how much am I earning per hour? And then you just want to focus on those tasks, like negotiating deals. Like if you equated that to an hourly, it could be $100,000 an hour, like depending on what type of deals you're negotiating. So it would make more sense for me to focus on that and delegate the rest. The average like middle-class family cannot relate to that thinking because they're not entrepreneurs. They have fixed income. So freeing up a couple of hours and paying somebody actually just costs them money. Whereas for an entrepreneur, it could make you money.
And I think it has to do a lot with like ambition levels too, right? Like look at the reality for, I would say 90% of people, right? If they had that free time, would they actually spend it on building their business or doing some sort of productive work? Yeah. And it's unfortunate, but a lot of people just would spend it on watching Netflix or playing Xbox or, just things that are non-productive to move them forward. Yeah. So for the right kind of person that's in the right mindset, it's a game changer. But I think for other people, it becomes more of like an enabler.
Yeah, I will say, like, I was probably more in that category of didn't really value my time. My parents weren't entrepreneurial. I had no reason to really like think like that, and I'd wish that I could like shake myself back then and like think about what you could accomplish with all this free time. But I wasted so much time when I was younger. I don't do that anymore. But
Now time's like extra precious. It's
yeah,
you realize that time ends up being the most important part of it.
100%. Yeah, it's like everything. So, and I already knew that. Like once I started getting into the real estate space, 2011, like I bought my first property, and that was when I started to realize, and I was working entirely for myself, and just realized like you can't spare those hours. Like, and the more time passes, the more you realize, oh shit, like I'm another year older. And, you know, what do I have to show for it? And that starts becoming, for me, that became this like pain point. Like I wanted to have more accomplished, so I just started making bigger moves, knowing that I'm never going to get the time back. And if there's a time to do it, it's, you know, for me, it was like in my 20s. So
yeah, that's exactly it. People need to understand like that the value in being able to kind of move past a certain point really happens in entrepreneurship, and you kind of need to have like some sort of breaking point. And I think a lot of people, the breaking point comes too late, but the earlier it comes for you, where you realize that and you just take the risk and go down that road,
yeah,
you know, your life's so much better off, right? But
yeah,
you know, you can probably attest to this. I'm not sure if you ever had like a corporate job or something like a 9 to 5, but I probably work, you know, twice as much as I did then, but I'm twice as happy.
yeah,
Right. Because you kind of like make your own schedule, you get to work on things, but you also shift focus on the things that you want to do. Right.
yeah.
But you do bear a lot more responsibility, and people don't talk about that side either.
Yeah. The last time I made like a job where I got paid for my time. So I worked for Western, so that didn't count. That was actually a pretty fun job. It wasn't really paid for my time. I got paid to just teach a bunch of classes. And then before that, I worked in a factory in between university, and that was awful. That's the motivation to not.
Was that the worst job?
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, it was just so boring. It was just horrible. I was hired to do like maintenance in the summers. I was summer student maintenance to like clean wheels off of these buggies that spooled yarn. And like, it's as boring as it sounds.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I mean, that was like the truly grueling job that you just don't want. And, but for me, I was never really able to work for people. Like I learned early on, I'm like, nah, I don't want you telling me what to do. Nah, I can't see myself doing that. Like every time somebody told me like, go to university, get a good job. Like you can have everything we have. And I'm like, I don't want that. Like, is anybody who ever like said that, I'm like, but I don't want to have what you have. Like, it doesn't look like you're that happy. Exactly what you just said though. Like, you know, when you're doing it for yourself and you're building something, it's like, it's fun. I want to work. Like if I'm given free time, and my wife doesn't totally relate with this, if I'm given free time and she's like, well, what do you want to do today? I'm like, I'd really like to work. I'd really like to go get some stuff done.
And that's the best thing ever.
Yeah.
If you know, you're doing what you love, then it's not bad. It doesn't feel like work.
Yeah. It doesn't. Like I'd be working on the audiobook or doing something else, creating something, building something for the business, creating a system. And I'm like, that's fun. Like I like that. Monotony is what I don't like.
Yeah. So tell me about the audiobook.
Well, yeah, we got our book now. So the book came out. We had #1 bestseller in the paperback and in the digital version on Kindle. And I was gonna like farm out the audiobook recording originally and have somebody read it for me. And then I just started thinking, I'm like, well, there's gonna be a value in having me read it, but it's gonna take me a while. So I just started. I'm just like, okay, we're going to record chapter 1. And I already have all the audio gear at home and stuff. And like, I've been doing this stuff, played music and what have you. So, so maybe like 3 chapters done, still little touches. There's 20 some odd. So yeah, it's going to be a bit.
I always find people who skip the audio version of a book, it's a big mistake. Like for me,
mistake.
I probably 15 to 20 books a year,
but all Audible, right?
All Audible.
Yeah.
And I've been like that for years.
Same. Like I've read, a handful of paperbacks, like maybe 20, 30 in my life. I've consumed hundreds of audiobooks.
For sure.
Like it's just, you have way more time if you're driving. Anyone who drives anywhere or commutes anywhere has time to listen to an audiobook and make driving time or commuting time productive.
Unless you're listening to a certain podcast.
Yeah, unless you're listening to this podcast right here, which big reason why I have that podcast. So if you listen to the Audible version of my book when it's available, you'll get a much more polished version of me speaking.
Yeah, it's cool, man, to be able to do stuff like that and share your journey. I think it's hard for a lot of people in real estate. And I think a lot of younger people are maybe discouraged that didn't catch the last wave.
Mhm.
But I think, people kind of that are lukewarm interested in it, it's a great time for them to get in and
get into
listen to
real
stuff
estate?
like that and
Yeah.
get the advice now.
Yeah, that's a great topic. I'd love for a little, what does a beginner do conversation here? Because you're saying
For
they
sure.
can still get in. I think that people can still get in. Do it young. If it was my advice, which I'm not giving advice, but if I were to do it now and, like setting aside that I wouldn't have met my wife if I didn't go to university. So let's just set that aside. But if I was just a random dude getting started, I would not go to university. I would go right into work for somebody like you and say, teach me everything you know. And then I would learn everything you know by not everything, but I'd learn what I felt I needed to know and start taking action.
Yeah, mentorship's by far the most important part of kind of any career in any industry, I would say.
But doing that, I would live in the parents' basement the entire time, save every single dollar I made. And that's my contingency fund. That allows me to take, I just have that money available for an opportunity that came. And I'm not talking about make 20%. I'm talking to make 2,000% in an entrepreneurial endeavor that's related to real estate. And then as you build up that base of capital, now you start investing in more passive things. But that's the kind of...
It's still possible for sure, man.
Yeah.
I don't know who sold the narrative to people that they can't buy real estate, like it was big media or whatever. But, I have smart, savvy people that come to me on either the coaching or the realtor side in their young 20s. And we're always finding them deals. And, they might have to make some short-term sacrifice and maybe renting where they want to live and using cash flow from where they buy to maybe offset that. But, using CMHC products and, higher loan to value, buying small multifamily, so 2-3 units, and then, buying in some sort of tertiary market that still can have good appreciation, but not just a pure cash flow market.
Yeah.
And I always tell people this, reflecting on my journey, what changes your life? Does cash flow change your life or appreciation?
Yeah.
And if you look at most long-term investors, they're going to say appreciation changes their life.
Cash flow does in a way too, because it allows you to structure your short-term life. But in the long run, it's going to be the appreciation for pretty well everybody, almost everybody.
I'm a big kind of proponent of that too, right? Like a big believer on kind of the hybrid investing strategy, to be honest, like a little bit of both.
You need that short-term money. Is it short-term money, medium money, long-term money?
Exactly.
Right. Like the short-term money, if you don't have that taken care of, you're kind of screwed. So yeah, obviously take care of that. But then the next thing you're thinking is medium. What's, the next 2 to 3 years look like? What's the next 10 years look like? What's retirement look like? And if you're not setting yourself up for that, make big changes now, not little ones.
For absolutely. And when I was in that position and I was a young investor and I was kind of like teeing up my first deal, I remember someone saying this to me once and it always stuck with me and it's probably allowed me to sleep, at night going through all the different economic cycles. He said there's 3 components to real estate. There's borrowing for the down payment, there's borrowing for the mortgage, and there's borrowing for construction. The rule of thumb is you can only ever borrow 2. And if you only ever borrow 2, you'll always be able to sleep at night.
It's an interesting point. Yeah. Don't borrow all of it. And I would say for actually we did a couple of deals like that. We used to fund everything. We just borrowed money, but there was a lot of built-in equity into these deals. But I agree with you because at that point, all I eat, slept, breathed real estate. Like if I was in a project, that was all I was doing. And yes, early on, I feel like people will do that and you probably won't sleep that well. But
you got to go through those motions.
That's the early moments, and I'm not recommending that because that could blow up in your face. But that's the early moments as you establish yourself. You kind of have to go throw everything at something. I mean, at least for me, I did. Again, not advice.
I find most investors who've kind of made it long term and who have been kind of like coming up to the 10-year mark and whatever, like most of them all have the similar story where they didn't outsource a lot at the beginning and they were in there painting and like really grinding and had those sleepless nights and were scrapping
and
deals
heavily
together.
Leveraged and some of them. Yeah. I mean, for me, I was like, I leveraged right up early on to do like that first project in 2015. But yeah, like as time passes, you make a little money. Now you start going a much better position. You have more equity in the deals. And then you don't refinance everything the second you can. You let equity build up and you protect yourself, right? Like when you're young, when you first start, like you're going to find more people. It's more common to have that low equity position. People really threw everything they could. And then as time passes, it gets better. But there are ways to not do that. Like you can bring in joint venture partners and that way it's equity. It's not debt. And yeah, you get a smaller piece of it, but you still are name on real estate and growing.
I think the name of the game for like new investors is just move forward and find any way to just start, learn the business from there. And you hit on a great point, is like just find someone from a mentorship standpoint you can attach at the hip and just take advice.
You gotta work for them, right? Like, I mean, whether you're paid or not, go work for them. And if you live with your parents, you actually can do that. Like if you just keep your expenses at nil, you can afford to work for free and truly pick who you want to work for. Hey, I'll work for you. You know, give me a month to prove myself. If you don't like me, I'll keep working for you for free until you tell me I'm worth something.
Like, who would say no to that?
Who would say no? No one would say no. So you go pick the guy you want to work for. You make that pitch, they'll say, well, just based on how confident you are, obviously I'm going to say yes. Like, somebody came and said that to me. That's what I would say. But who will?
Younger people just got to get more aggressive, man. They got to get more aggressive. I'll tell you a quick story, and it was a bit of a life learning lesson for me. This happened 2 weeks ago. So by my house, there's this road. It's called Mississauga Road, and it's got these like 30, 40, $50 million houses. And ever since I was a kid, I always drove by this one house, and I'm like, man, what the hell does that guy do for a living? And I wanted to go film a piece of content for my Instagram, and I wanted to do it at this guy's house. And I drive up there. He's got his whole gate in front of his house, and it kind of just looked crappy. So, you know, I mulled it over. Do I knock on his door or not? And I said no. So I drive away, and I go film a piece of content somewhere else. And an hour later, I'm driving home. I said, you know what? I got this like weird feeling. I want to go back and just knock on this guy's door. And my assistant and I are there. And we're arguing. No, you go knock on his door. I'll go knock on his door, whatever. And it was one door that I knocked on that entire day. And I went and knocked on it. And right as I was about to walk away, because no one opened it, someone opened the door. And it was just lucky that the homeowner was there. And I asked him if I could film the content piece. He said, yeah, no problem. But the key was that right when he was closing the door, I said, hey, do you mind just telling me what you do for a living for a second? And it opened up a conversation, and I ended up spending 5 hours with this guy. And he just sold his business for $430 million, and he's looking to invest in things and partnerships. And, you know, it was such an amazing relationship that we built, and we've talked every week since then. But the whole point of it is I put myself out of my comfort zone, and I just took a risk and did it, right? And the chance of that happening obviously is very slim, but if you're out there doing something like that every day and you're a new investor or a young entrepreneur, you know, you got to make luck for yourself. I
like that. Make luck for yourself. Yeah, that's one of the things we tell the people who work for us is the more calls you make, the more lucky you get.
Exactly, right? It's, you know, people really need to instill that. Honestly, you just can't be working hard.
Yeah, like there's working hard, but there's working smart. And I think, doing that which makes you probably most uncomfortable is probably the thing you need to be doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and things that, you know, once you get older that used to make you uncomfortable don't make you uncomfortable
they won't make
anymore.
You anyway. I used to do this like task organizing thing. I read this book about how to get organized, and it's like, well, make a list of everything you had to do and then put veg, as in like eating your vegetables, next to the two most daunting things that you would put off until later in the day. Do those first. Eat your vegetables first.
I like that.
And I'm like, I started doing that. And the book was like, yeah, like you will have an empowered feeling as soon as you crush those two top tasks, the hardest ones, the ones you would procrastinate on. If you do those first, you're gonna have a better day. You're going to get through more. You're going to get your task list done faster.
And you're not dreading them all day, because we've all done that before, and you're just dreading it all day and waiting and waiting.
Yeah.
And waiting.
So if you have, like, if you know that the best thing I can do is reach out to, like, just like what you did. Oh my God, that takes some courage. Not a lot of people want to do that. But if you do that, like, look what happened. One conversation.
It can change your life.
Yeah. It could change your life. But you were one of the few that's actually willing to even do that, even put themselves out there.
And that was a lesson for me that, you know, I kind of took away from that is, you know, I'm pretty open to risk, but I got to be doing it more often in ways that make sense where I can get benefit from it. Mm-hmm. But, you know, when you're younger and you don't know what risks to take, it's hard because you don't have direction, right? And I think in some instances when someone is very passionate about real estate, like if you don't have someone you can find in your network of mentor, I think there is a place for paid mentorship where it does benefit you. But I do think that there was a lot of people who went down that route that they weren't at the right place to be able to take advantage of it. And when I went through some of those programs and did some of those things, and they really helped my career.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Mentorship can help. I've paid. I've mentored people. I've done paid coaching, and I think the most important thing is like you've got somebody there who's been there who can like you can now bounce your ideas off of them. So now, like with my coaching students, and you probably have this exact same thing. Like you'll hear them say, "Oh, we're going to do this." I'm like, "Sure about that?" What if this happens? Like you'll come across this like basic thing they were thinking. You're like, whoa, that would have really cost you some money. I just earned my fee right there.
Yeah, it's funny too, because some of my students, I noticed a trend. Like during the winter, I find a lot of the students listen to a lot more podcasts and stuff like that when there's not as much to do outside. And there'd be a certain podcast episode that would come out from someone with some sort of like strategy. And I remember having coaching calls the next week after that episode would air, and I'd have like 10 students all saying, hey, I'm going to be starting this strategy now. But then the next week, a different episode will come out and there's a different strategy.
Yeah, that's the shiny object syndrome.
Exactly.
Yeah, you'll have that. That's another big thing, like with my coaching students, and I'm sure you have this too, is just, hey, this is what you said you wanted to do. I'm looking at the two of you. You said you have this available time, these available skills, this available money. What type of strategies make sense? What did we say? Oh yeah, we said this type of strategy makes sense. Does that fit? No. Okay. Yeah. So we're not going to do that right now. Maybe later. We'll set that aside for now. Like just kind of redirecting is a huge portion of it, because when people are new, like, and I had it like early on, like what should I be doing? It only becomes really clear further into your investing journey, like what you should be doing as you get more established.
Absolutely.
As you get more established, more experience under your belt, you see how your skills work with the strategy you've taken on. Like I have like a funny fit in like an organization as far as like entrepreneurship goes. Like I'm like highly analytical. I don't like, I'm not that extroverted. Like I don't really enjoy being on the phone that much. Like I love like doing this kind of thing, but so for our setup now, I'm not the guy making all the calls, but I am facilitating the business. And that's usually where I find myself. I'm like the guy pulling the strings, like making sure everything works.
A lot of businesses lack that, and they don't realize, right? Like they think that the kind of grow quick and build the infrastructure later, like that works. But the reality is at some point, like you got to take a step back and you got to build the infrastructure.
Systems,
I spent the last year pretty much doing that.
Yeah.
I bought a couple properties, but the majority of it was just maximizing current properties owned and then working on active income streams and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's one point I want to touch on too, because I'm sure you see it with your students. A lot of students have this false narrative, or just younger real estate investors, that they're going to acquire real estate and they're just going to quit their jobs and then they just keep buying real estate. But they don't realize that there has to be a transition plan of some sort of active income stream that's aligned with real estate after.
Yeah. And that's the way I think you need to go these days. And I think one of the easiest ones that anyone can get into is the Airbnb side of things. Being an arbitrage host is like, not even that hard. It's like a handful of phone calls. Go study somebody who did it, and then just implement it. Like I don't think there's a faster way if you're frugal and your living situation isn't super crazy. Like you could do that strategy and be out of a job inside the year. However, you can't do it stupid. Like you obviously have to make sure that you know what you're doing. You probably have to invest in some good mentorship. But it's very, very doable. And that's in my mind, that's a business that's aligned with real estate. There are other things like you can go become an appraiser, become a realtor, all that stuff works. You just got to decide, how does that fit with my long-term goals? Like you obviously did the realtor thing, right? You do coaching, real estate. It's all aligned. You're talking about real estate in both of them. They teach you, there's a synergy between what you do in the coaching side of things and your actual portfolio yourself. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
I love it when it all works together. Yeah.
And the most important thing too is like you're an active investor too and doing a bunch of other stuff, right? Like if you're teaching on something, you need to be active in what you're teaching because things move so quick, especially with policy and lending and who knows what, right? But I think the alignment between having an active business in real estate with your passive investing journey works really, really, really well, unless you can bring in a joint venture partner that can take on that portion for you. And that's the only other time where I really see it going well. Someone's got a joint venture partner who's a high net worth earner, and then they're basically kind of managing or growing the business and portfolio with them.
So what would you accomplish by having that joint venture partner that's high net worth? You're saying then you could take a salary from your projects? Like, I mean, doesn't the person still need their short-term income?
Yeah, they're for sure. I got someone that a buddy of mine that does work like that, and he is on salary with his partner. Yeah, and where his big long-term growth is in the equity. Yeah,
but if you take a small salary so you can pay your bills, and then equity is your growth. Yeah,
exactly. But if you are starting out and you don't have that option, right, you do need something. And what that something is I always tell people, if they can't figure out what the transition is in real estate while growing their portfolio, go on sales. It's the easiest thing to make the most amount of money with working the least amount. Yeah. Software sales specifically.
Sales, and I've said this so many times, like you can't learn a better skill than sales. Like
Exactly.
it is the most useful skill you could ever learn. Get into sales. Couldn't recommend that enough. I wish that I had, taken an opportunity to do that at some point. Like going back right to the beginning, I would have loved to just take a year and just get into a sales job and just do that. I mean, ultimately, mortgage, I got into the mortgage biz, which was sales. And it wasn't as clear to learn, but I loved that I had that experience where I got to learn sales, and then I studied it and I started pairing it with what I was doing and like learning how to ask closing questions, how to lead things forward, ask a question that occurs beyond, for people who don't know what that means, occurs beyond the sale. So in other words, the vacuum salesman saying, would you like it in red or blue before the person's agreed? Don't do that, obviously. But anyways, yeah, I think sales is absolutely a great thing to do. But of course there are others. But the thing is, like, I remember when I got into the mortgage biz, it was probably like 6 months of doing that when I really started to realize that I would be speaking with like bank reps. I would speak with other brokers who had nowhere near the level of knowledge about the products they were selling and like the whole thing. And I'm like, whoa, like I pick up on this stuff. Like if you're interested, you'll pick up. You don't even have to do that job forever. You can actually move into another. You could do one for a while. You can kind of survey the different real estate jobs. By the time you're done, like imagine like a mentorship program that actually let you work in the different jobs and paid you. Like,
That'd be the best thing ever.
You could go work as a mortgage broker for a while, a year as a realtor, like working on a real estate team, a year working in private equity. After 3 years, like what you would know and what you could do, and then work for a developer for a year, 4 years, or even do 6 months at each. Good Lord, what you'll understand by the time you're done.
Yeah, you'll provide actual value. And if you're going to be good at whatever you do, like providing value over the long term is what allows you to have a good business.
100%.
I've been a realtor now, just coming on about a year and a half, like almost 2 years since I actually started practicing. And, we'll probably do $25-30 million of deals this year, maybe even more. But the reason for that was because of the background of building the infrastructure of like having relationships and working at things. And, I think there's a false narrative where people jump into these and they just think, oh, I did the course, I'm certified now I make the money. But the reality is that's when the work actually starts.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, it was like I had the infrastructure to build on. And then I looked at this infrastructure that I had and I said, okay, with the current resources and the current connections that I have, how could I provide value to them? And then how could I make money? Yeah. And then when I thought about, relationships I have, buying my own property, students and stuff like that, the realtor business fit in perfect because I had done so many acquisitions myself.
Yeah. Like you would have come into that job and known more than most people with a real estate license. Coming from the investor background, you've worked with the lawyers, you've been through the process, like you've already lived and breathed it. It just makes all the difference.
Yeah, exactly. You just want to provide as much value as possible. And, a lot of realtors just don't provide any value.
No. Most realtors don't, right? Like they call it the 80-20, but it's more like 90-10. Like
seriously,
10% of realtors are going to be like a true value add. The other 90%, like they're just getting jobs because, it's friends and family and not to say some of them can't add value too. Like if you're dealing with the average homeowner, like even those realtors might be a bit of a value. So, I mean, for our standpoint, like as an investor, 90% of the realtors you're going to encounter pretty much won't be any help.
Which I never understood. Like you sell real estate for a living, but I guarantee you 99% of realtors don't own any real estate above and beyond their primary residence, maybe a cottage.
Do you think it's 99%?
Maybe not maybe 95, but it's a large portion, I would say.
Yeah,
I would say it's most
actually, I've heard the stats in the U.S. The stats in the U.S. are like crazy. Like
really?
It's like they don't even own their own home.
Oh God!
Like they've never owned the property.
Oh
like
no.
You've got tons of realtors like that. Yeah, you got to watch out. You do. You really got to make sure. And if you've been in the industry enough, you'll know by the things they say whether they know what they're doing or not.
Yeah, and they should be able to handhold you through the process, right? Like if someone comes with experience, whether they're a mortgage broker, they're a coach, they're a realtor, if they've been around the block, they should be able to
speak from experience. Yeah,
speak from experience. And the 20% that maybe they can't, they at least have a connection that can.
Yeah. And you could just be totally transparent. Like you could have come onto that job day one, say it's my first day as a realtor, but I've been an investor for like 10 years.
Exactly.
So I figured, hey, you know why I got into this job? Because I already knew everything about real estate. I just didn't have my license. So now I just formalized it. And that's like a confidence where you'll pick up clients right away. You're like, oh yeah, I know Jack. He knows what he's doing. Yeah, he'll get it done. Like a friend of mine, Scott, he just got his license, like been an investor for like 10, 15 years. He already knows what he's doing. Like He was immediately, right out of the gate, he was selling deals to people.
So it's the best thing to do. And that's going back to like the infrastructure thing. Like he figured out kind of, I'm sure before he went down that path, he was probably thinking, is it mortgage broker? Is it this? Is it that? Whatever. And his skill set's most suitable to that. And I'm sure he's bringing tremendous value to people.
Yeah.
And that's where I think a lot of people go wrong in choosing their power team.
Yeah.
You know, the people that might give them the biggest discount or that promise the most or that have the most availability.
Yeah, you know,
I think that's a big red flag.
Cheap, willing to discount their fee, red flag. Always available, bit of a red flag. Like you want the one that's busy but sees the value in you and working with you.
Yeah, it's hard. Sometimes, like, you know, you got to turn customers away. I had someone that was referred to me 2 weeks ago, and they were looking for a flip property. And I said, okay, well, we got to narrow down the area. You know, I have different deals that come in different areas, and I got to send it to this person, whatever, for that. And they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, we're not first priority. Like, we don't get the flip. You're the best deals. And I said, well, I can't just only send you deals first if I got other clients I'm working with and whatever. And we just had to part ways because, you know, they wanted like an exclusivity for properties. And if someone's focusing in one area, but they're focusing everywhere, like it doesn't really work like that.
Yeah. I just want all your best deals.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That makes a lot of sense. Cool. Jack, is there anything like you wanted to cover that we didn't cover today? I know we had like a general chit chat, which is good, but like anything you wished I'd asked you about?
No, that's pretty much it. I think, you know, for those who've been following my journey, we've had a lot going on. We kind of took the last year to focus on building foundations and systems, and we're back to growth on, you know, buying multifamily real estate.
Is that what you're doing personally too, in addition to selling it for clients, buying and selling it for clients?
Yeah. So the way I like to look at it is this: I have the two active income strategies of being a real estate coach and being a multifamily realtor. And then all the profits I divert from that just going to acquire more assets. Yeah. And it's a simple flow. It allows to grow all the businesses together because I can have someone on the passive side who's interested in doing business on the active side and kind of feed both beasts, right? Yeah. But, you know, if anybody wants to follow me, my Instagram's Bernstone Capital. My name's Jack Bernstein. And, you know, you can find me on my website too, www.bernstonecapital.com.
Nice. And what areas? Like, what's your expansion plan 5 years from now? Where will you be invested?
I think the United States is a natural plan of progression very soon. There's some other investment strategies outside of real estate that I've explored and done well in too, which I'd like to do as well. And then probably only just multifamily real estate. Like really in Canada, it's the only way to properly scale and expand. And you can't do that in the 1s, 2s, and 3, 4 unit buildings. It's got to be a larger multifamily.
Yeah. And any specific, like, are you going to be an MLI Select kind of approach? Are you going to do like purpose built, like ground up development with the CMHC financing? Like, are those some of the things you're thinking or already doing? Yeah, value add approach, you know, now works again with the new shift in MLI again, where it didn't maybe work even 4 weeks ago. A lot of people were buying purpose built and they were buying stabilized assets just because of the way that it was working with the financing. Yeah, for the refinance restriction, right? Exactly. Yeah. So it's funny, CMHC, you know, they flips a switch and then a different strategy works now. My prediction for this, which is obvious, is like a huge surge in applications now because the amount of deals that will qualify is way beyond what it was before. Absolutely. And, you know, it sucks because I had a bunch of friends that were mid deals and they're just burning hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest between all of them, just having to go to these different lenders and go to approved lenders and just basically waiting out their 2-year period. But now they can just apply and directly. Should be good. Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. Like, obviously they were just buying time. They probably got flooded with applications they couldn't handle. So they just made the restrictions high until they could hire enough people, enough underwriters. And now they're probably good to go. Like, obviously they knew they're going to get hit with applications now, but it'll be all right. Exactly. But, yeah, I think for me, man, honestly, it's just like I've got a steady growth trajectory, just kind of keep on that. My day-to-day main focus is my active businesses of the coaching and realtor, and the passive business just kind of feeds itself as opportunities come along. Very cool. All right, Jack, thanks for doing this. Let's not let it be like 2 or 3 years again. We'll do this a little bit more regularly. We'll have to do one in Florida next time. Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, very cool. Thanks for doing this, and I'll talk to you soon. All right, thanks, brother. Appreciate it.